Hello, I am Sutonia. I thought I'd do an in-depth guide on how to get started with Frigate solo PvP and nullsec, focusing on the Kestrel and what in-game skills are important and what player skills plus knowledge you'll need to get yourself started. I think you can PvP well in nullsec with just 2 million skill points, and I've done it. You can see a video on my channel, on the Evis Easy channel, that I did. That was with a Kestrel with only 2 million SP, and I killed 4 Tech 2 ships. It was a full roam video though, rather than a guide. I've done plenty of Kestrel guides as well that you can find. The reason why I'm focusing on the Kestrel is that it's one of my favourite ships in the game. I think it blooms very well with very little SP, and it's very easy to use with a very simple strategy against most ships in the game. And I'll expand on this later. So the first part is what skills do you need for the Kestrel? And I think there are a few important skills that you'll need to be getting. A lot of these skills are universal skills that are useful on a lot of ships in the game. So this ship and this skill plan is not specialized at all. There's actually only 2 skills that I'm going to get to level 5, which you could argue are maybe kind of specialized, but they're not really. Is Rockets 5 and Caldari Frigate 5, but they are also useful on a number of different ships. Rockets is useful on 10 ships in the game, and Caldari Frigate opens around 17 to 18 ships. Oh, so it doesn't open, but it's useful for about 17 to 18 ships. So the first and most important PvP skill in the entire game is thermodynamics. Thermodynamics, or the ability to overheat, is such a huge boost to your ship. The speed, web and scram range and extra DPS boosts are huge and going to give us a big increase to our ship effectiveness. I recommend getting thermodynamics level 3 as soon as possible. And unfortunately, you need to train science level 4, which is the only bad part about it. I really wish CCP would change the science level 4 because it's an industry skill to capacitor operations 4, because that would be more useful and it would be in space and you use heat in space. But anyway, thermodynamics level 3 is our first main priority. Secondly, we want to get the fitting skills to 5, CPU management and power grid management 5. We also want to get weapons upgrades to level 4 to begin with, because it opens up the Tech 2 ballistic control system and the if you're flying a different ship other than the Kestrel, Tech 2 magnetic field stabilizer and other such modules. It also reduces the CPU requirement of your missile launchers as well, which is useful. We want to get shield upgrades to level 3 initially. Later we're going to be getting it to level 4, and we're going to get weapon upgrades to level 5 later as well, and then advanced weapon upgrades to level 4. The reason we get these ships, the advanced weapon upgrades level 4 and shield upgrades level 4, is it allows us to, on my fit, to fit a second DPS rig, which is really important. And we need good DPS to be able to kill our targets quickly. Higher DPS means more chance of us killing some guy before his friends arrive, and this is very important for solo PvP and nullsec. So for increasing your DPS, we have a few skills that we want to get as soon as possible, and the first one is guided missile precision. Unfortunately, we're going to need launcher operation level 5 to get that, which doesn't provide much benefit really. 2% DPS increase per level. And the next thing we're going to do is start getting our missile support skills level 3. We want to get Rockets 5 and Caldari Frigate 5 because they're the most time efficient damage increases. Get Rapid Launch 4. Try and get enough missile support so the range on your missiles is about 13 kilometers and about 10 kilometers with Rage missiles, so we can do DPS in web range. The navigation skills are really important, and they're often overlooked. Get them all to 3. The 3 skills that you need for navigation are acceleration control, high speed maneuvering, and evasive maneuvering. And because speed is life in 0-0, and you want to get them to level 4 after you get the other skills I mentioned, like the fitting skills. And the next skills you're probably going to be getting is the HP boosting skills, shield management, hull upgrades, and mechanics. They increase the HP of your ship. Shield management 4 is obviously the most important one we want to get, because we have a medium shield extender and it gives us the most benefit for time trained. But hull upgrades 4 is also important because it unlocks a Tech 2 damage control, which is a small upgrade for our ship, but you do need missile rigging level 3 and the other and weapon upgrades 5 for the Tech 2 damage control to fit on the ship. So it's something that we'll be doing later on. So initially get them to 3, later on we'll be boosting them up to 4. We only need a few odd ranks in capacitor skills, mostly just the prerequisites for thermodynamics is fine, maybe an extra level in high speed maneuvering, which is the MWD skill. You will be cap stable with MWD off in the Kestrel, even with complete garbage skills. I think even if with MWD on and you have capacitor level 1 skills, you can still perma run it with MWD off, and you can actually get it perma running with MWD on. You will be fighting scram range, so you won't need the MWD anyway, but all you need really is capacitor operation 4 and then high speed maneuvering 2, which you can check, which you'll be getting those skills, most of these cap skills anyway when you train for thermodynamics. But in just less than a day extra, you can get the Kestrel completely cap stable even with MWD on and everything running. And those are the important skills for you to focus on. If you're flying a ship other than the Kestrel, the same skills are very important. It's just instead of DPS skill, you might want to get a few more ranks in capacitor skills if you're flying an Amar ship or a Galanti ship. And you'll just obviously just substitute the DPS skills out for the turret DPS skills. And the fitting skills may be less important for some ships, like the Rifter, for example, if you want to fly the Mimitar frigate. Or they might be a bit slightly more important on some other ships. But for the most part, the skills that you need are pretty much the same. And I think that most frigates in the game you can PvP well with about less than 2 months training. So part 2 is getting into the right mindset of PvP. This is something you probably hear a lot of the time, but I'm going to repeat it anyway because it's really important. You're going to die a lot when you first start out, and there's so much information to process and so much that you have to learn that you're probably going to get exploded a lot before you start to enjoy yourself and really get into the enjoyable experience of EVE Online solo PvP. So here are a few tips I recommend if you want to break out into solo PvP in nullsec. And first one is, since we're going to die a lot, I recommend buying your ship and fittings in bulk. Buy 20 Kestrels plus fits or your frigate of choice and get them hauled down to a station near a few 0-0 entry points which have a medical facility, and update and set your clone to that station. And make sure you don't have any expensive implants in your clone. If you have access to jump clones, jumping to different empty clones from that station is a good way to leave a clone with PvP frigates ready and waiting if you decide to do some other things in EVE in the meantime. And what we want to do is we want to minimize the frustrating aspects of dying, which is mostly loss of time from having to get a new ship and the sort of the loss of ISK kind of, but having extra ships kind of offsets that. And we want to minimize the time you spend getting a new ship and getting straight back into the action in nullsec. And since you have many ships in bulk, losing one doesn't hurt as much. Remember that every time you die, you learn something new about how you can avoid it happening again, and keeping yourself in this learning mindset is important if you want to learn how to solo PvP. It's a long road, but it's highly rewarding. On choosing a good place to base out of, I'd recommend just finding a station that's close to a 0-0 region. So for example, on my Kestrel character, I'm basing out of Badivethi, which is a system in the Candid region, which has a medical facility, and it's 4 jumps from Quirius, and it's also not that far from Head GP if I want to go into Catch, and it's also not that far as well from Delve. So it's a pretty good region, it's a pretty good system to base out of for going into Quirius. The reason why I like going into Quirius and Delve and Catch right now is because there's recently been a few nullsec changes. There's some fighting going on in Fountain, and Quirius has recently changed hands. And whenever a region recently changes hands, it's a good place to roam usually, because it means that there's a lot of PvP assets in that area, because people who move ships there to fight for that region or move ships there to defend that region tend to still have them around, and that means they have ships there to fight you. If you need help with hauling or doing the logistics of moving ships, I would recommend just buying 20 Kestrels plus fits in a trade hub like Jitter or Omar, and then using a player hauling corporation like Red Frog Fright, for example, and paying them to move your stuff with courier contracts. The 10 to 15 million or so it'll cost you to move your stuff 10 to 12 jumps is well worth the time it will take you to move it in a Tech 1 Industrial if it'll end up taking you multiple trips. And you won't have to worry about having your stuff ganked if you set up the collateral properly on the contract. So the Kestrel and why it's good for beginners. The Kestrel is one of the best frigates for a new player to learn because it's very simple to fly. It has an almost universal strategy against most ships, and it doesn't require many skills to be effective, especially capacitor skills. You don't need them. You don't have to worry about micromanaging your capacitor. You also don't have to worry about some control things like tracking disruptors. You also don't have to worry about tracking as much in the Kestrel. So the Kestrel fit I recommend requires no micromanagement at all, because you only have 4 active modules, one of which will always be active, the damage control, and the other 3 will always be on when you're fighting. There's no micromanagement needed. We don't have to worry about our capacitor again, we don't have to worry about charges in modules or anything like that. We can focus almost entirely on the big picture and our macro PvP skills, which are important to develop for soloing in nullsec. The Kestrel is cap stable with MWD off even with level 1 skills, and we can get it cap stable with MWD on in less than a day's extra training, so that's why it's good. The Kestrel is a rocket ship. Rockets excel at doing damage at the edge of scram range, where they mitigate a lot of damage from close range turrets, often out damaging them and being on par with long range turret damage while not having drawbacks of having to worry about tracking, and generally higher tier turrets which can hit you at rocket range use up higher ship resources to fit them, like power grid, CPU, capacitor. The Kestrel has a flat damage bonus for missiles as well as a velocity bonus. The velocity bonus is important because with lower missile support skills you won't be able to hit into web range without the ship velocity bonus. So that's why I like the Kestrel as opposed to the Breacher. So let's get into important tools that you'll be using for solo PvP. The first 2 are kind of similar, the Directional Scanner and the Probe Scanner. These are tools that you're going to be using to find ships, as well as to use defensively, so you can see what is coming in, where different ships may be. So the Directional Scanner is pretty simple. You've got 2 sliders up here. One is the angle at which you scan. It's important to know that the direction it scans is always this ship bracket here, which will always be the center of your screen. So for example, if I want to scan this asteroid belt here, I'd put my ship over it like this, and then I would go down to 5AU, and if I do that, you can see I'm scanning in just this belt and this moon because it's a bit too close. But you can change the angle like this, and you can also change the range. So for example, one thing that you might be doing while you're fighting a frigate, when you're in a fight, let's say there's some stuff in a POS that's close by but it's not on the same grid. So what I could do is I could change it to 1 million kilometers, and I'm going to be spamming this while I'm fighting to see what might be coming in to where I am right now. And if you're fighting at distant places where there's maybe not so much clutter, again, you want to put this as high as you can, so you can see what is coming into the grid. That's the main reason why you'll be using the Directional Scanner for. The Directional Scanner is very powerful, and you should definitely be using it. You can also use it to scan gates and to check different things. So for example, if there was a gate here, there isn't one, but whatever, I could go to 5AU and I could scan that gate and I could see, oh, there's nothing there, so I can warp there. Important things that you might want to use is the active overview setting. I just have a PvP overview here. You might want to add some things onto there. Make sure you have combat scanner probes on there. That's pretty important. You also want to have warp disruption probes, the ones that are launched by interdictors. You might also want the anchorable bubbles. I wouldn't recommend them be on your actual overview, but having them on the directional scanner can sometimes be useful. I don't actually have that set up here. The probe scanner is we won't actually be using probes on our ship, but it's mostly useful for here so we can see what anomalies are in the system. When we go into a busy system with a lot of anomalies, we can tell that it's, for example, a ratting system, and we can start scanning down and trying to find ratters in that system. I recommend having it sort deascending like this, so that way the mining anomalies will come automatically to the top of your scanner, and the mining anomalies are good to warp in there. Hidden mining belts, just warp to them because there often will be miners in there. And if you can tackle a mining ship, it can be a good way to either get a kill or to bait some more stuff to come into the engagement. And that's mostly the basic things that you'll be using with this. The world map has so much useful information on it, which is useful to you. The world map can tell you where to find ratters, where to avoid gate camps, and a whole manner of other things. I'll keep this focused on the basics for the sake of this guide, but there are a ton of things you can do with the map that are really interesting, and with other external sites such as .land/eve maps. So average pilots in space is probably the most basic and useful function. It tells you on average how many people were in that solar system, and it lights up the map accordingly. This is obviously great for finding out where to roam. We want to go to active places to get fights, and it can also tell us where busy areas are, which we may want to avoid, depending on which ship you're flying. If you're flying something bigger like a battlecruiser, you might want to avoid the busier systems. We aren't too worried about going to busy areas when we're in a frigate, because we have higher mobility and we generally want to be able to find more people to get more chance of getting a fight. Pilots docked and active is also very useful. It can show you on the map where the HQ systems are. HQ systems tend to be places where people have PvP ships stored, and in smaller ships these can be good systems to go to if you aren't getting any suitable targets, as it's likely a lot of the locals have some interceptors or something similar stored there. In larger ships you may want to avoid these systems as you can be overwhelmed quickly. It's also worth noting the location of the HQ systems if you're PvPing nearby, because this is likely location where enemy reinforcements will come from. Cynosure fields are great tools for getting people angry and getting them to form up to fight you. You also get a kill mill, as insignificant as it might be. Cynos are often lit by rookie ships or T1 frigates on stations, which you can kill. Just remember to use the directional scanner first before warping in to see what is on the field and what the Cynosure ship is. Be wary about warping to Cynos which aren't on stations. Remember that Cynosure ships cannot move, so you can always warp in -10 kilometers and escape from them if they do start beating you, if you warp in on a Cyno destroyer or something. The cyan and light blue dots represent Cynosure fields which have been lit by ships, and those are the ones you're interested in. The orange marks are Cynosure fields that are on the POS modules, so they're not actually active Cynosure fields that you can warp to with a frigate or something lighting them. And the red dots on the map are systems that have both a normal Cynosure field as well as a POS Cynosure field. Pirate and police ships killed is a weirdly named option on the map, which essentially just means NPCs killed. This is what you're going to be using if you're looking to find busy ratting pockets. Showing up in these pockets, even if you're in a frigate, is a good way to put pressure on people to form up and fight you. Ships destroyed and pods destroyed is a good way to spot potential gate camps. Be wary of systems which have higher pods destroyed count than 1. Some HQ systems have a few capsules destroyed because people self-destruct to go elsewhere, like back to their home system, but pods destroyed outside HQ systems can be a sign of a gate camp. Remember, you can always use Dotland, Z-Keyboard and EveKill to check out systems that you might be expected to have a hostile gang or a gate camp inside. System geography. One of the most important aspects of soloing is being aware of your surroundings and the geography of a system. By this I mean taking advantage of different grids and locations in and out of the system. This may sound confusing, so let me explain this in 3 parts. The first part is on-grid geography, or often on-grid separation. What this means is that you try and manipulate a grid to your advantage by splitting up hostiles. And understanding common ship speeds and their influence zones, you can kill enemy ships even outnumbered on the same grid if you can separate them properly. With the Kestrel and Frigates, usually what this means is moving away from ships and killing enemy tacklers while they're outside of other ships' influence zones. The first important thing to take into account is that the minimum warp distance is 150 kilometers. This applies to gang warps too. Remember, when trying to split up hostiles on a grid, is that you don't want to move further than 150 kilometers from them, otherwise they can warp to the target that you're engaging. Also be wary of ship warp speeds and the possibility of bounce bookmarks on any ships which are at a warpable distance. What I mean by influence zones of a ship is the area around them which they can affect the fight in some way. For example, let's assume that the enemy gang includes a Harbinger. The Harbinger has 5 light and medium drones, which will probably have a maximum range of 57 to 60 kilometers with max skills, and the Harbinger probably also has heavy pulse lasers fitted, which reach to about 30 kilometers or so. It also has a warp disruptor fitted typically, and goes around 1 to 1.2 kilometers a second, depending on if its armor is short. Therefore, we don't want to start a fight closer than about 80 kilometers from a Harbinger, as this would hopefully give us about 25 to 30 seconds or so, including his acceleration and drone control time and his lock time as well, before he can put light drones on us. That gives us enough time to kill his gangmate tackling for him. Also remember that depending on what you're fighting, you could kite away from the Harbinger, making it take longer to reach you. There are so many ships in EVE, and additionally many different configurations for different ships, so I will not go over all of them. You will learn all the different ship engagement ranges and typical fits in time, so let's move on to the second part of system geography. The second part is off-grid separation. This is the art of splitting people up over different locations in a system. I've praised this in several of my videos. Sometimes you just cannot fight on a grid because there are too many enemy ships or too many dangerous ships that have big influence zones which prevent you from fighting on that grid. So by warping to a different location, for example a faraway planet, which is the typical thing that you'll be going to, you can hopefully split the enemy forces up so that you can kill them. This is useful for a variety of different reasons. We can use the directional scanner defensively to judge what is following us. Providing that we are aligned, we can usually just bail if too many things or harder to engage things follow us. The first region is that bigger ships are typically not engageable for us in a frigate, will take longer to arrive if we are followed by tacklers. So in this previous example, let's say we're followed by a frigate and then a Harbinger warps, the Harbinger warps as well to a planet that we warp to. The Harbinger has half the warp speed of a Tech 1 frigate, so it will take twice as long to arrive, and probably even longer because it has a lower agility, and it will also have a lock time when it does land on grid of about 8 to 9 seconds. So by warping to a planet, we're basically buying ourselves time to fight the tackler that followed us, even if the Harbinger and the frigate warp towards us. They enter warp at the same time. Battleships and cruisers are a lot slower. Sorry, cruisers are about 60% slower, and battleships are more than twice as slow as frigates. The second reason is that often when targets are attempting to catch you, they'll split themselves up hoping to catch you. So, for example, let's say in a Kestrel and there's 2 interceptors on a gate. Typically, if I warp to a planet, one of them is going to warp to 0 kilometers and the other one is going to warp to 100 kilometers. You know, they're going to communicate together and decide that, okay, I'm going to go 0, you go 100 because we want to catch this guy. They want to give themselves the best chance of catching me if I'm trying to run, by splitting up and trying to hope that one of them lands in disruption range of where I'd warp to. But by doing this, they actually split themselves up. So let's say I warp to 0, another interceptor warps to 0 following me, and then the other interceptor warps minus 100. Because I land on top of this other interceptor, I can fight him, and because the other interceptor will be out of the fight for about 20 seconds as he MWDs towards us, hopefully I can take down that guy and maybe escape with my ship after killing the first guy. And also, when they're split up like that, sometimes you can even kill both of them when you otherwise wouldn't be able to. The third reason why it's good is it's often easier to split up people with on-grid separation on distant planets, because the hostiles are less likely to have bookmarks and bounce spots on the planet grids than they are to have on gate and station grids. It's very common for people to have bounce bookmarks on gates or stations, but not at planets. So this can improve your chance of fighting opponents who make good use of bounce spots to warp to gangmates. And finally, another good reason is people who fly longer range ships, like Crow for example, that try to orbit you at 20 kilometers and they don't want to ever enter scram range and bombard you with light missiles. They're very difficult to catch in a slower ship, especially if you have lower navigation skills. But when they're trying to catch you, they often don't think twice about warping to 0 or warping to 100. And sometimes if you just warp to 0, then a Crow will follow you to 0, and then you can start the fight at your range and kill them easily. And last but not least, remember that you can split people up over different systems. And this is the last part of the system geography, is that you can move to another system and hope that ships will follow you, and the slower, bulkier ships will have a harder time keeping up. And sometimes when you make it appear that you're trying to leave the system and run, the hostiles seem to be more willing to try and follow you and to catch you and to split themselves up and make mistakes. And here is a few other common examples of good reasons to move systems and use this to your advantage. First one is gate aggression, and you can split targets up on a gate using the gate aggression mechanic, which is a very good way of getting the engagements you want. What this means is we want to get certain dangerous ships aggressed to us on one side so we can kill ships on another side, or to slow down other ships and kill them while their friends are locked out of the system with aggression. So let's look at the previous example that I used. Harbinger and 2 crows. Let's say we warp to the gate at 0, and what we really want to do is we want to get the Harbinger out of the fight. So we're going to just wait on the gate, orbit the Harbinger 500 meters so he can't track us, and hopefully what will happen is one of the crows is going to jump to try and catch us on the other side, and probably the Harbinger is going to point us on this side, or one of the crows is going to point us on this side. And if that happens, what we can do is we can jump, we'll fight the crow. Let's say the Harbinger didn't aggress, but one of the crows did, and pointed us on this side, and the Harbinger and the crow jumped. So what we can do then is we can reapproach the gate with MWD on, and jump back through. Hopefully the Harbinger and crow are going to engage us on the other side, which probably they will try and do. And then we can jump, and then we can fight the previously aggressed crow 1v1 on the gate, which is great. And using gates can also be a good way to grab ships. Again, similar to the planet example, ships that try and kite at longer ranges, they often position themselves at 0 on the gate to give them the best chance, so that when you decloak you'll be in range of their warp disruptor. But this puts them in overheated warp range by doing this, and almost with scram range and with good agility. By the time they often react, often people, when they're sitting on a gate trying to catch you, they don't think about moving and positioning first. They think about, okay, I want to control click, put my warp disruptor on this guy, and they don't know where you're coming from until you decloak. And so you can often get them, a crow waiting on you to jump into you to disrupt you. You can decloak, approach him, and just get scram web on him immediately. And I had a fight that's very similar to this in the Ferox video I did, where there was a bunch of ships chasing me, but I got them split up, and one of the vagabond that I wanted to engage was just sitting at 0 on a gate. So I was able to get him in blaster range of my Ferox very easily, which is normally a very slow ship, which won't be able to catch the vagabond if he's any good. Changing systems can also be a good way to avoid warfare links. If you think that the enemy has a command ship out of POS, or a command ship on grid, or a tech-free booster, or you can, by changing systems, you can play it a bit safer and split them up without the gang bonuses. And if you travel multiple systems as well, you can also split up enemies a lot. Okay, so next up we're going to go over some matchups with the Kestrel, which are pretty common. I'm going to go over most frigates that you'll encounter in the game. So let's start off with the Amar frigates. You're going to load Nova Rage against most of these. Crucifier, it's not really a PvP ship, but you sometimes see it. The TDs are useless against you, the tracking disruptors, because you have missiles, and just kite at 6 to 7 kilometers. They normally have a NOS or a NU in the highs, so just deny them the utility highs is the best play against them. Against the Executioner, Tormentor, and Punisher, you have pretty much the same strategy, which is to be at 6 to 7 kilometers. You want to force laser ships to have to use Scorch on you, which is lower damage ammo. You don't want them to be able to use Conflagration or Multi-Frequency, which is a higher damage ammo. Also, the Execution and the Punisher have a utility high slot, so they often have a Nosferatu module. So if you stay outside that range at 7 kilometers, then they will have a harder time with their tank. And Kardari frigates, you want to use Module No Rage against most of these. The Condor does less damage than you, so and it doesn't have a velocity bonus, and that's really important. So if you stay at 7 or 8 kilometers against a Rocket Condor, you can win anyway because you just have better stats than him. But if you stay at 8 kilometers, then he cannot use T2 rockets against you because they won't reach you, but your T2 rockets will reach him. If the Condor is like missiles with damps, which is pretty common, or just like missile fit, you might need to catch them with the slingshot method. I think you can probably either escape or catch the Condor. I don't think you're in much danger of dying to him unless you stay around for too long. Against the Kestrel, it's a mirror matchup. It's just whoever has the highest skills wins. Just make sure you load Modular Rage against a Kestrel. And against the Merlin, very often it's Blaster Fit. You're going to try and stay at 7 kilometers from it. I know it's pretty much the same tactics against almost every ship, and that's why the Kestrel is really good. But yeah, you just stay at 7 kilometers, force him to have to use null, and even then you're going to be outside the majority of null DPS range. And Rail Merlin isn't as common, but you can often just kill a Rail Merlin in a straight up duel because you simply have better DPS than him. And also, rails are harder to fit, so he will have he probably won't have as good modules as you on your ship, basically. Glanty Frigates, we're going to load Nova Rage against all of these pretty much, and PvP Maulers, this is sort of like the Crucifier in that it does exist, but it's kind of funny. But anyway, most Mauluses will try and kite you out with damps and drones, and just try and slingshot it. If you can't kill it, if you can't slingshot it, make sure you kill the drones. You can kill the drones while you're trying to slingshot it as well, which is useful. The Maulus doesn't do much damage at all. It only has 6 light drones as well, and it can use 4 at a time. So if you can kill the drones, and it loses a lot of its DPS. Tristan. There are many Tristan fits. Mostly they're normally armor tanked, and they have either newts or turrets in the highs, and they use drones. I recommend kiting it at 7 kilometers, even though it's a drone ship. It doesn't really matter where you are relative to it, and if you can stay outside the NOS and newt range, you can hurt its tank and lower its ability to affect you, and also you kite his turrets if he has blasters fitted, or if he has like lower tier rails are pretty common on Tristans, and antimatter on 75mm won't hit you at 7 to 8 kilometers. So if you stay out there, then you'll avoid a lot of his damage. Incursors, they often have big active tanks, but they often have no damage at range. They also don't have a tracking bonus either, which is important to remember, although you're not going to mitigate DPS by orbiting it. Anyway, just kite it at 7 kilometers. If it has an injector, just beware. Some people use like micro-opto-scram injector incursuses that tank a lot of DPS. You can just leave, because if he doesn't have a web, then you're faster than him. So really, just stay at 7 kilometers, play it safe. Atron, it's the same as everything. You're going to kite at 7 kilometers to prevent it from using antimatter and void. The Atron does have a fall-off bonus, so it will be able to do some damage to you with null, but you're still going to mitigate a lot of its damage by staying at range. And you tend to be able to out-brawl an Atron. I mean, it does do more DPS than you at point blank, but if it's using null, its DPS is actually very similar to your rocket DPS, and you just have more hit points than him. So generally, you can just generally out-brawl it, just don't go into void range. Mimitar Frigates, bit of a different strategy against these. Against Breacher, we're going to use Modular Rage. It's very important that the Breacher doesn't get a missile velocity bonus. So when you're fighting a Breacher, you want to be at 8 to 9 kilometers, because that way he can't use Tech 2 missiles on you, because they won't have enough range. Also, another thing to keep in mind when you're fighting missile ships that don't have missile velocity bonuses is the traversal velocity, where you're going, where he's going. If he's approaching towards you and you're moving away from him, you're essentially lowering his missile range, because missiles start from the point where they're launched. So if you're 8 kilometers away from a breacher, he's moving towards you at 500 meters per second. You're moving away from him at almost around 400 meters per second or whatever. Then by the time the missile reaches you, you've already wasted like half a second of its travel time, and then it expires before it reaches you. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're fighting against Breacher or any other missile ship that doesn't have a velocity bonus like the Condor. Just make sure you use T2 Modular, which is the EM ammo, and just keep in mind your direction. Breachers do tank a lot, but if you can kite him at 8 kilometers or so, you deny him Tech 2 missiles, and if you do the thing where I say, where you sort of watch which direction you're going, if you're moving away from him, it's a lot better, because it makes his missiles have to travel more, and even with faction, sometimes they will expire before they hit you. And against the Rifter, which is the next ship, you want to kite out range to force barrage. Remember, you also have high explosive resistances as well. We don't have any resistance mods on our ships aside from the damage control, so forcing him to shoot explosive into our shields is very, very useful. Rifters can sometimes be shield fit, so I recommend you use Scourge instead of Nova, just in case you end up against a medium shield extender Rifter, although you're not really in any danger of dying to a medium shield extender Rifter. Because same with the Incursus, right? If any ship doesn't have range control on you, if they just have MWD Scram, medium shield extender, you can just leave because you have a web. But I would just recommend loading Scourge against them just to be on the safer side, to be able to kill it quickly in case it's a tackler and you're fighting against a lot of frigates in nullsec or something. And against the Slasher, use Modular. There's sometimes armor tank slashes, but they're not very common, and since they only have 2 low slots. Anyway, against the slasher, you just want to kite at range and force barrage out of them. So faction frigates, obviously fighting a faction frigate and a T1 frigate is at a somewhat inherent disadvantage, and I would not recommend it really, but you know, you can win against a lot of these faction frigates. So Caldari Navy Hookbill, load modular rage. One advantage we have against the Hookbill is the Hookbill has a lot of its damage bonuses invested into kinetic bonuses, whereas we can use EM rage against it. Even though the Hookbill does out DPS us, because he has to use kinetic missiles against us, and we don't have any resistance modules, it's kind of an advantage because we can use EM against him, but he cannot use EM against us. Also, remember that the Hookbill isn't really that much stronger than the Kestrel in terms of direct brawling. The main strength of the Hookbill is it gets the 5th missile, which normally people use for second web so they can control ships, or they use a tracking disruptor or something for engaging turret ships. Personally, I would engage a Hookbill. I mean, the chances of winning are like 40%, so probably not in your favour. But that's not a bad odds, you know, considering it's a faction ship. So, you know, I would try a Hookbill, to be honest with you. Also, Hookbills tend to be a bit harder to fit with medium shield extender and rockets. You need a power grid mod usually, I think, for MWD medium shield extender rockets. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I remember when I tried to EFT one. So often they'll be a bit weaker. I mean, it's still stronger than you, but you can win sometimes, and it's worth a try if you can find one alone. Federation Navy Comet. We're gonna load Nova Rage. Normally, Federation Navy Comets are blaster fit in nullsec, and you can win if you can kite it at range. It isn't as vulnerable as most other blaster ships though, because it does have 3 small drones, so you are going to be taking, you know, 50 to 60 DPS depending on what drones it's using. You should still be able to win versus it if you're able to kite it out. Against rails, it's a lot closer, similar odds to the Hookbill, but typically people don't fly rail comets in 0-0 as much as you might see in factional warfare, so personally, I'll go for it. I mean, remember, you can always use the look at tool and look at it and then see what weapons it has fitted. So, definitely engage a blaster Federation Navy Comet. If you can kite it out, you can win. Against the Imperial Navy Slicer, you're going to load Nova Rage. This is a very difficult fight, which will depend almost entirely on the slicer pilot, and mostly if he fucks up, basically. But you can win if you can catch him early on, and you can orbit him. This is probably the only pulse ship that you would try to orbit. It's still, I don't think you'll still be able to mitigate much of his damage though, but it's a very risky engage. But you know, if like you jump into one and there's one on the gate and you can just decloak and approach and get a scram and whip on him, yeah, go for it. But or it lands on your 0, go for it. But don't try and catch one if it's kiting at range, because you're probably going to die to it. And Imperial Navy Firetail, load Scorched Fury against this. Firetails that can be armor or shield, that's why I would go for Scorched Fury. I think I don't know which one seems to pop up more. I've seen quite a few armor and shield ones, so armor ones tend to focus more on range control with a 4th mid slot for for tracking disruptor or web, or sometimes a drill prop. And the shield ones tend to focus more on damage. You want to kite them as range as long as possible to force barrage and mitigate DPS from that. Artillery Firetails also exist as well. Firetail is a very versatile ship. They often engage at the edge of scram range, and you should have a decent shot at winning against an RT Firetail though, because you have more DPS with T2 rockets, and you have similar effective hit points to an RT Firetail, because often they don't have a medium shield extender. You can fit, or they have just like an auxiliary rep. So on pirate faction frigates, for now I would avoid them. If you have a lot more skill points, you can engage them, but I think you should judge this on a case-by-case basis. Like, you know, look up their fits on killboard history and engage them if you think they've got a bad fit, or, I don't know, you just think they're bad for some reason. Otherwise, I would avoid, unless you can, like, find a scenario like a kiting Garma engages you at 0 for some reason, you know, something like that. I would not engage pirate faction frigates. That said, the Astero is maybe a bit weaker. I would probably engage in Astero, but I would probably avoid the other pirate faction frigates. So, interceptors. Starting off with the Crusader. The Crusader out-damages you even in scorch range, and it can mitigate your T2 rocket DPS because it has a high base speed, especially the fit that I use, which has an overdrive. So you're not going to be able to do full damage to Tech 2 rocket DPS. That's why I recommend you load Caldari Navy Inferno or Caldari Navy Nova. It doesn't really matter either thermal or explosive, because it has T2 resists. The explosive resistances on it is almost the same as the thermal, but thermal is slightly better at shooting through its shields. It doesn't really matter which one you use. It might be worth loading the missile type depending on what else is on the field. Like, you don't want to load Nova if there's a Condor and a Crusader, for example. You'd rather have Inferno. It's a very risky engage, I think, against a proper fit Crusader. That said, I don't really see that many good Crusader fits around, so I would engage it, to be honest. But it is a hard fight that's not in your favour. Malediction. It does less DPS than you. It does have a good tank. So usually, most brawler fit Maledictions, if they're fit properly, can tank around 100 DPS or so. It does have it can mitigate your T2 rockets because it does have high base speed. Now, recently in the recent expansion, not the previous one, but the one before that, what's it called? Oceanus. It got higher mass, but it got a lot more base speed, so it can actually mitigate T2 rockets now because it has a higher base speed. So load Caldari Navy, not T2 against it. Remember that the Malediction doesn't get a velocity bonus like you, so try and kite it at 7 to 8 kilometers. That way you can deny the Malediction being able to use Tech 2 rockets. Also, remember the Malediction has utility high. Many brawling style PvP fit Maledictions often have a Nosferatu fit, so that they can run their auxiliary armor rep longer. So if you can stay out of NOS range and deny them that, it will increase your chances of winning. I think you have a really good chance of killing a malediction. Most maledictions also that you encounter in NoSec tend to not to be like direct PvP fit. They tend to be more like tackler fit, and they tend to be a lot worse, and you can kill them very easily. Most crows are long range fit with light. Or we're going on to Kadari now. Most crows are long range fit with light missiles, and you can kill one easily if you can catch it. Remember that the rocket crow also loses to you because you do more damage than him. Make sure you load Modular Fury against the crow. It's not going to be able to mitigate your DPS as much because it has a lower base speed, and it also has a higher signature radius because they often have medium shield extenders fit. Against the Raptor, kite it at range. It is a blaster ship. It does have an optimal bonus though, so it can still do some decent DPS to you at range, but you can still you should be able to out damage it though if you can kite it further than 7 kilometers away. Make sure you load Modular Fury against the Raptor because they'll often have a medium shield extender, and that increases their sig. And Raptors tend to have high signature radius anyway, higher than most of the other interceptors, and yeah. Eris is very weak in direct combat. Just kite it at 6 kilometers anyway, just to avoid the blaster DPS. But it doesn't have bonus blasters in terms of damage. It just has a tracking and an optimal bonus. This is an easy engage for you. Just load CN Nova. It can mitigate some T2 rocket DPS sometimes, because often they have often Erises are normally pure tacklers, and they often have load of speed mods in the lows. So even if you have a scramble web on it, T2 rocket sometimes will do less damage than Kadari Navy. So I recommend loading Kadari Navy against the Eris. Against the Tyrannus, it does a lot of DPS at close range. This is a Raptor that does 50% more damage, but it because it also has drones. But remember that Tyrannus is dual prop usually. Most good ones are anyway. So make sure you load Kadari Navy, because if the Tyrannus is afterburning, then it's going to mitigate your Tech 2 rocket damage. You want to try and kite as much as possible. If you can stay out of blaster range for about 10 seconds or more, then you're in a decent position to kill it. Yeah, so Tyrannus, just kite it at 7 kilometers. You can win against the Tyrannus. The Claw does a lot of damage at close range. It's very underestimated. It also has high effective hit points often, and because it has the lowest signature radius in the game, 30mm signature radius, it shares that with the Slasher. It also has very high base speed. It moves at 600 meters per second with no modules fitted to it. So make sure you use Kadari Navy, not Tech 2 against it. But remember that the Claw only has 2 mid slots, so you can control a Claw, and it shouldn't be able to gain on you even with the higher base speed. So just keep it at range at 7 kilometers, and the fight's yours. Claw isn't too dangerous as long as it doesn't get on top of you. Stiletto is the weakest interceptor in the game on pure combat stats. The Stiletto is the best, I guess you could say, the best pure tackler, but it's also the weakest in terms of defense because it only has 2 turrets that are bonused. So I recommend loading Scourge Rage against the Stiletto. It does have some EM resistances, especially on armor, even though the Stiletto is not armor fit. So use Scourge, so that way kinetic damage on its shields does almost the same damage, but it will get through its armor a lot quicker as well. So you can kite at range if you want, but it can't beat you at 1 kilometer anyway. But it can sometimes help you out if you're fighting against multiple ships to do kite at range. So let's get on to the assault frigates. I would recommend completely avoiding Retribution, Vengeance, Hawk, and Ishka. They all do damage to you at your range, almost their full damage, and your chances of beating them is really low. I mean, the Hawk is basically you with more damage. It tanks a lot more, has resistances, and more hit points. So, you know, your chances of killing a Hawk is completely is really small. I would never engage a Hawk in a Kestrel, for example. Ishko I wouldn't engage either, just because it does a lot of DPS at range. It also has an optimal bonus as well. So if it has blasters, even though you outdamage him, if he's just using drones, you know, the like null blaster DPS is gonna swing the fight, and since it has more hit points than you. Vengeance is super tanky, and you can kind of win this one if you can perfectly kite him at 10 kilometers for the entire fight, but it's going to be going in and out of scram range, and it's incredibly risky. I would not engage a Vengeance. Retribution is the kind of the same story. It has an optimal bonus, so it's going to be able to hit you with Scorch anywhere, and then it has a much better tank than you. So don't engage the Retribution. So which ones can you engage? Harpy, it's still really low because it has double optimal bonus with null. You can try it. You know, personally, I would, if you see a Harpy, I'd look his fit up on kill boards. You know, maybe if you see that he only ever uses Void or something like that, or you see he has a bad fit, engage it. Otherwise, engaging a Harpy is probably a bad idea. NU only has one optimal bonus, but it still does decent DPS at range. You can kill NUs. Just make sure you kite them at 8 to 9 kilometers. You should be faster than it. So in theory, if he doesn't try to like wiggle around and just hits approach on you like most blaster pilots tend to do, you can keep him at 9 kilometers and win the fight. It's not because you keep him at 9 kilometers as well. Just keep this in mind that you are slightly faster than him. You could just kind of bail if you start getting owned, but it's still pretty risky. When it comes to assault frigates that you can engage, typically the Minmatar ones you have the best chances are against. Jaguar, the Jaguar is just the weakest assault frigate in the game, I think, in terms of just direct combat. It is kind of like some weird assault frigate hybrid, because it has a lot higher speed than the other assault frigates. It's about 20% faster, but you know, just it just doesn't do enough DPS really. I think is with the Jaguar in it, since it doesn't have like many of the other assault frigates. It has an optimal bonus, but that doesn't really help it with autocannons, which is how Jaguars are typically fit. You can definitely kill a Jaguar if you kite it at range at 7 to 8 kilometers. It tends to be a long fight though, so prepare for a long fight. Don't fight a Jaguar if it has friends in the system, because even if you are beating it, you know, some his friends are going to come into the fight. So load Scourge Fury against a Jaguar is what I would recommend, because it is a T2 Minmatar ship, so it has the resistances. So against the Wolf, a decent fit Wolf will wreck you every time. That said, the amount of decent fit Wolves that I've seen in my time are pretty low. And remember that Wolves also only have 2 mid slots, so if you can just stay at 8 kilometers or so, you should be able to keep him there perfectly. And if you do encounter one of the decent Wolves, you can just bail. If you start losing, just move away, align to an object away from him, warp out, and load Nova Fury against a Wolf. And that's it for the matchups. I didn't cover every single ship, but these are just most of the most common ships. As you can probably tell, staying at 7 to 8 kilometers is pretty much what you're doing against every single ship in the game, except for the Imperial Navy Slicer, in most cases. So I want to show you the first example. This will show you a lot of on-grid separation. That's what I do in a system. So showing you me jumping into the system, BUZ-DB. And there's a lot of things going on in this system, so I thought it would be a good example. So I jump into this system, and straight away there's a bunch of bubbles on the gate. So I checked the directional scanner. It doesn't look like there's any sort of PvP ships really. I know that there's a Succubus, a Sleipnir, and a Vexor Navy issue on scan, but they're not on the gate. And there is a Cynosuchus field on the station, which is probably the Imperia, but there's also a Succubus and a Vexor Navy issue, so I decided not to warp to the Cynosuchus field because there's likely going to be ships there. So what I do is so if you sort by type ascending, like this, you can see all the asteroid belts come to the top of your directional scanner. So I warp to the largest asteroid belt, which is the enormous potent asteroid cluster, because there was some mining barges on scan, and this is actually 33 AU away. So the mining barges on scan now are probably at POS, but these mining barges are probably in the mining belt or in a different mining belt. So I warp to the belt, and as you can see, bang on, there's a bunch of miners here, but there is a disruption bubble here. So skiffs, and there is also a scorpion here as well, so I cannot actually engage them. And procurers are very, very risky to engage. I wouldn't engage them at all in a Tech 1 frigate because they have the same hit points as a battle cruiser, and they also do 150 DPS with light drones. So don't engage them. I saw one of the skiffs was separated, so I was sort of debating about whether or not I should like go in on it at 10 kilometers or something. But then I check in the directional scanner defensively to see sort of what is coming in, if anything's going to come in. And one thing I did remember earlier on the gate was there was a SBU, I think it was, or a TCU that was off the gate. And I should have mentioned that when I came in. But I see on the directional scanner that there is a Succubus coming in, and that's a ship that we cannot fight at all because it's the Sanchez frigate. It has an afterburner bonus, so it's going to mitigate a lot of your DPS. It's probably the hardest one to engage for us out of all the pirate faction frigates, and I wouldn't engage any of the pirate faction frigates anyway. So I warped to the SBU because I know it was off the gate, and I know it's going to be kind of safe for me to warp there and not warp into the bubbles. So we land on this gate here, and there's a Caracal. Now Caracal is typically rapid light missile fit. They go about 2 kilometers a second, just shy of that. And obviously, if we're in range of like 55 kilometers from them, they are going to completely wreck us. So we cannot get within 55, and because they go 2 kilometers a second, we don't want to start a fight with a Caracal when it's closer to us than 80 kilometers. So I burn off this SPU a bit just in case something warps down to it. And you know, really at this point I should be trying to use the directional scanner defensively a bit more, because this Crow sort of comes in. I was trying to find a Celestial to align to away from the Caracal, but I should have been checking the directional scanner. So I see that there's nothing else coming in defensively because I used the 1AU scan. I don't think anything else is going to come in. So I overheat my MWD and my Scram and my web, and I go in on this Crow. And I'm able to get an overheated web on him and my overheated Scram on him. And no, I started the fight where you see the Caracal's positioning. I started the fight when the Caracal was 80 kilometers away. So that way I know that by the time he gets into his DPS range, I'm going to be able to finish off this Crow, or I'm going to have the Crow really low. And like I said, like the Crow is a lot weaker than the Kestrel in direct combat. I line out at this point because I know the Crow's going to die, and I warp just before the Caracal even does damage to me. So that's a good example of sort of on-grid separation, as well as what I'm doing in the system, you know, warping to belts. So here's a good example of off-grid separation. There's a Tengu and Astero on a station, and I want to fight the Astero because I know he has a probe launcher because I looked at the ship. And he also has a cloak, and I think he's pretty interested in fighting me because he was burning towards me. But I can't fight him with the Tengu on the station, and the Astero is not going to leave the Tengu's range. So what I do is I warp to the sun, and I wait for something to come in, and I see that the Astero is actually following me. So I make sure I load explosive missiles, Nova Rage missiles, and then he actually he lands or decloaks 50 kilometers from me, so I burn towards him, and he burns towards me. And Astero is normally a very hard fight in a Kestrel, especially when you have only 4 million skill points. But I was pretty confident I could win. It wasn't a complete PvP fit Estero, like I said, because I know it had a core probe launcher at least, because I looked at the ship, and it also has a cloak. So it's not the best fit it could be. Normally most like scary PvP fit Esteros have Nosferatu or a similar module. So I'm able to kill this Estero. It's still pretty close though, because he did take me down to low shields. That's just a very basic example of grid separation. So this is an example of off system separation, or changing systems to separate. So I warped to a bell, and I managed to make a procurer leave the bell. I wouldn't engage a procurer though. And they do have a Signable and an Ashimu. There's also a Kisune here and an Arazu. And just showing you a few clips just so you can see what they had all together. So I was trying to split them up in the system, but they wouldn't really budge, and the Kisune is a very big problem for me. They also have a manner of other ships. And you can see them chasing me here. I warp to the bubble, and then on a gate, and there's a few things chasing me and following me. I'm trying to split them up. But luckily, when you're in a system like this that has 4 gates in it, it's a lot easier to split people up between different systems. Especially when they have a gate camp mentality of trying to catch you at gates, jumping into them. So I'm going to play the clip from here. This is sort of about 2 jumps away. I sort of burned away, and Crusaders following me. I went about 2 to 3 jumps because there was a Crow and a Crusader in that gang, and I know that they're going to be the first ships to come in. And I also knew that I didn't see the Kisune in local because I remembered his pilot name. So I just go on the Crusader here. I also noticed that the Crusader had a very high base speed, which means that he has a very bad fit in all likeliness, and he did. And then go on to the Crow, but then a rapid light Cerberus comes in, which is pretty much cancer to frigates. And you know, might have been able to get out there if I was a bit more on the ball when I killed the Crusader, but I don't think so. But still, killing a Crusader in my 3 million ISK Kestrel was definitely worth it. So I want to show you sort of a chain of clips. So as you just see at the start of this clip, I'm getting shot at by an Ishtar and some other stuff, and they do have a Stiletto and a Crow, but there's also about 12 other PvP ships in that system that were chasing me around. So I decided to go into the next system. They also had a Claymore. I don't know if it was links or not, or if it was active, but I didn't want to fight them if they had links. So I decided to move to a different system, and trolling in local is sometimes a good idea to get people to engage you, especially if you pretend to be a clueless 3-month-old noob. It can be pretty funny. So what I'm sort of trying to do is I want the tacklers to split up from the main group, which mostly consists of ships like the Ishtar, and there was a Cerberus in the system as well, and also Claymore. And I really want to fight the Crow, and I want to fight the Stiletto if possible. There was also a Condor and another Interceptor in there. So those are the ships that I want to fight. So this is about 3 minutes later if you look at the clock. The Crow did end up following me, and he aggressed me, but I wasn't able to catch him because he was orbiting me at range, and the Kestrel was a bit slow, and I had level 3 navigation skills at this point in this clip. But what I did is I warped to a gate, and I was hoping that he would follow me at 0 because he would still have aggression. And this is one thing a lot of people with fast warping ships often forget about. You can check how much aggression they have left as well if you look at the timer. So because the gate aggression is 60 seconds, I checked the timer and I saw that he still had 30 seconds. So he lands here on me at 0, and then I just able to kill him when I wasn't able to catch him before. And I do love trolling in local on 3-month-old Kestrel characters. It is pretty fun. But yeah, Crow is pretty easy to score, especially a long range one. If they land on you at 0, you can see that locals went up a bit. There was a gate fire on this gate, so I was a bit hesitant to just clear the gate instead of looting the wreck. And then this is about 3 minutes later after the Crow. they're still chasing me down the pipe, and a condor comes in as well, and able to just go on in the condor. This is actually a rocket condor, but the Kestrel is just stronger than the condor, because the Kestrel can use EM damage first of all, and the condor can only use kinetic, which we have higher base resistances to on our shield. The second thing is that the condor only has 3 missile launchers, even though it gets a 10% bonus per level. It only has 4.5 effective launchers, and we have 5 effective launchers, and the Crow just has better hit points and fittings as well. So the Crow is just stronger in a direct fight. So I'm able to kill the condor, and then I sort of continue running, and just to keep ahead of this group that's chasing me. And then a malediction comes in, and I make a few big mistakes in this fight, so I want to show you them. And the first is I didn't let my shields regen that much from the condor fight. You can still see that I was missing about 1/3 of my shield. The second thing is this is a malediction, and maledictions don't get a velocity bonus, but I'm actually approaching this malediction. The reason why I'm approaching him is because I thought it was just going to be like a terrible tackler, but it's actually, I think, a dual rep malediction with a injector. That's why you don't see a web on me, and I should have used that to my advantage. I should have burned away from him, and I should have also sort of orbited him at 8 to 9 kilometers so that his missiles would not hit me. And also, since he doesn't have a web, I could have bailed easily if I just positioned myself well in this fight. So I messed up pretty hard here. Also, I didn't actually have any nanite paste in this run, but I should have repaired my missiles. If I was able to heat, maybe I could have killed him. It's fairly unlikely against a dual rep malediction, but I mean, I could have escaped from that easily, and I should have waited for my shields to be full and my ship to be in better state before fighting a Tech 2 ship. I want to show you this fight. The fight itself isn't very interesting, but it's in a system where there was a lot of other stuff. As you can see on the directional scanner, there was about 10 other ships, and all of them are incredibly dangerous, including 2 logistics ships. But this stiletto goes in on me, so I check the directional scanner. I see, or actually, they're not actually on the gate yet. They're still pretty far away. If they're in a gang warp together, which they most likely are, then they're at least 15 seconds away. So I decide to go in on this stiletto, and like I said, this in the matchup things, the stiletto is one of the weakest direct PvP ships in the game. It's actually weaker than the slasher, and it's probably the weakest frigate in the game, aside from the noob ships, in terms of direct PvP, because it has 2 bonus turrets. As you can see, I keep checking 1AU on the directional scanner just to see what's coming in, and you can see just as I warped out that everything was starting to come in. Now this final fight is pretty hilarious. There's not that much skill involved in it on my part, but I found it pretty funny, and a lot of new players can probably relate to this. So I was in this system in Fade, it's a Space Monkeys Alliance system, and I wasn't really getting any fights. I kept warping to belts, and I managed to get some miners to warp out, but then they were just camping me in with a bunch of stuff that was not engageable at all, and I couldn't run the camp, and they were just chasing me around with battleships and interdictors and other sort of things. So I started to troll them in local, and I thought this was pretty funny. And pretending to be a retarded 3-month-old pilot is definitely can play off sometimes. So getting people kind of angry like this can sometimes force them to make some terrible mistakes, which you will see later. It's not really a terrible mistake. Well, it'll end up really terrible for them. Let's just put it that way. So I found this pretty funny because this guy was bragging about how he has never flown a frigate in 3 years, and he's bragging about his SP, and this is like an 8-year-old guy, and he's bragging about how much SP he has. And I only have 3.8 million SP in this video. So just to give you some context, so this is just sort of what was camping the gate, and there's more on the other side. You've got Saber, Republic Fleet Firetail, Flycatcher, and the Republic Fleet Firetail wasn't coming on, but then they offered me a 1v1 in local, which is pretty strange for Space Monkeys Alliance to do, as you will find out. So this guy in Astero wants to 1v1 me, so I go for him, and he attacks me, and I just decide to fight him. Astero is a very hard ship to kill normally, especially if it's proper PvP fit. This was I guess it wasn't the best fit, but it was still pretty decent for a PvP fit Astero. So I decided to fight this guy, and I was checking scanner, and nothing was sort of coming in yet, so I thought maybe they were actually going to 1v1 me, and I'm actually winning against this guy. As you can see, he's going into structure while I'm half shields, and he's still tanking a bit though, because he is an Astero with a decent rep tank. But then the Saber comes in, and they dishonor the 1v1 with a 3-month-old Kestrel against an Astero, and this guy's bragging about him playing for 8 years and having so much SP. So they dishonored the 1v1, as you can see, and the Saber starts killing me, and the Astero dies. It's pretty funny, as the Proteus lands from their alliance. I tried to send the 8-year-old Saber pilot a mail after I died, with a bit of tongue-in-cheek trolling about his bragging of how much SP he had and still dishonouring the 1v1 with a 3-month-old Kestrel and losing, but unfortunately he blocked me, sad face. The bottom line I wanted to show you with this is that SP doesn't matter all that much, and you can go out and do great things as long as you have the basics covered. I also thought it would be fun to show you this, as I know a lot of new players who get screwed by horrible guys like that, who dishonour 1v1s, even when they're at an advantage, and a little bit of retribution and karma is fun to see. So you're now ready to go out and make your own fun adventures. Thanks for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to the Eva's Easy channel for me, and join my channel EIE Pub in game.